When it comes to cookware, everyone has their own preference, and what you carry is greatly dictated by what you plan on cooking in the outdoors. I thought for today, though, it would be interesting to take a look at the tinware that Nessmuk carried and speak a bit about different cook sets and bits of cookware, their uses, my preference, and just how much cookware a woodsman has to carry. Now, unfortunately, despite my best efforts, I have yet to come across a cook set that's quite the same as the one Nessmuk describes in Woodcraft and Camping. But basically, his is composed of 4 dishes and 1 pot or kettle, as he calls it. So his dishes, his largest one is 6 inches across on the bottom. It's got 2-inch sidewalls, and then at the top it is 6 3/4 inches across. And that one's made from a heavier tin. His next dish is made the same, but it's slightly smaller, so it nests inside of that first dish. And he has 2 more, each one smaller than the last, made from a lighter tin, and those also nest inside. So when all 4 dishes are together, they're only as big as that first dish. Now, the 2 that are made from the heavier tin would likely have been frying pans to be put over the fire and cooked with. And then the 2 other ones that were made from the lighter tin, likely those were serving or eating dishes. And then he also has a kettle, which would look something like this. I know a lot of us these days, the term kettle resonates with something that looks like this that's meant for tea or coffee. But he's referring to a potato kettle that would be a pot like this with a lid and a bail. And that kettle was large enough so that his dishes could sit inside of that, so that in his kit, his entire cook set was only as big as his 1 kettle. Now, this set here is probably about the closest I've come to a set that resembles his. It is made up of 2 pots and 1 frying pan. This frying pan is 7 inches in diameter at the base. And let's see here. So this is the bigger pot, and this would have been about the size of his kettle. It wouldn't have been so curved towards the bottom. It probably was likely almost 7 inches across at the base, I would assume, with about 3.5 or 4-inch sidewalls. And then it had ears for the bail, which he said were set below the lip of the pot so that they wouldn't get bent in his pack. And then the bail obviously would fold off to the side so it wasn't sticking out in his pack. But so he would have his pot, which was about this size. His dishes would nest inside of it, and that was his complete cook set. Now, in trying to get as close to his set as possible, I can take these 2 pots, nest them together. I can take this small tin plate and put it on top. I should mention too that since none of these have handles, it came with a pot gripper. The pot gripper just grabs the lip of the dish like that. And I usually store that inside. So that tin goes there, and then I keep this cloth and I lay it over top for my frying pan, since it is seasoned, similar to the way cast iron is. That can sit on top like that, and then I can take this other dish and place it on the bottom. And so I end up with a kit that is a little bit bigger than what he would have carried, but it's still 5 dishes, and this would be plenty sufficient for a long-term stay in the outdoors. Now, I should mention his kit, inside of his kettle, once his dishes were in there likely was excess room in there that he could have stored things in, perhaps breakable items that he didn't want to get damaged in his pack, or he could have stored some of his food rations in there as well. I do quite like Nessmuk's kit with the 4 dishes and 1 kettle and how everything nests together. If I had to make any changes, for me personally, it would be to swap out one of the dishes with another kettle or pot, mainly for the fact that when I'm in the backcountry, I rely on boiling my water to purify it. So having a designated pot for boiling and cooling water to keep up my water intake is quite nice to have. So if I had the perfect cook kit, it would be 2 pots like this, and ideally they would have lids. Unfortunately, this kit doesn't. But 2 pots with lids, and then 2 frying pans or 2 dishes would be plenty sufficient, and you can even get away pretty easily with just 1. But something like this here would be probably about perfect for me and my needs. Over the years, I've used quite a variety of cookware over an open fire, so I thought I would just share a few thoughts with you. First one being with these billy pots or bush pots, pots that are a little more narrow and tall. Personally, I'm not a real big fan of them. I know they are growing in popularity because they are easier to pack since they're narrower, but the trade-off with that is that they are far more tippy because they don't have as wide of a base, especially something like this. This is a percolator pot, but you can imagine when this is full and you put that into a fire, it gets pretty tippy. It doesn't have a wide enough base to really support the weight that's in here. That's one reason why I'm not a super big fan of these. And you also lose a lot of versatility with these, which I'll get to in just a minute. When it comes to frying pans, one thing to keep in mind is the overall size. A lot of frying pans these days that are marketed towards campers are quite small, too small in fact. They are 5 inches in diameter at the base, and in my opinion, that's just too small. You can't fit a full-size meal in there. And if you do, it's heaping over. When you try and turn it over to cook it evenly, you end up spilling your food over the edge. This one here is a 6-inch frying pan. That's the size of Nessmuk's largest frying pan, was 6 inches at the base. And my preference is something like this that's 7 inches, and even one like this right here that's 8 inches at the base would be very suitable, and you're going to be able to fit a full-size meal in here. But something as small as 4 inches or 5 inches, it may be easier to pack, but the trade-off is that you're not going to be able to cook in it very easily, and if you can, you're not going to be cooking a full-size meal. Another consideration with frying pans is whether or not they have a handle. Something like this right here that doesn't have a handle is far lighter and far easier to pack without a giant handle sticking out compared to something like this. This is a fairly heavy pan. It has a big handle on it, and being able to get rid of that handle, shed that weight, really saves on weight in your pack. And of course, trying to pack this inside your pack with this long handle is not an easy task at all. This frying pan here, it had a great big long handle on it that was so heavy when you set the frying pan down while it was empty, it would lean back. So I cut it off, realizing it was hollow, and now I can just carve a stick and stick it into here and have a nice fixed frying pan handle at camp, but I can take it apart and not have to pack that in my pack. Other options include a folding handle, which are quite convenient and certainly lighter than something like this, but again, it is still more weight in your kit that you have to carry. Again, my preference is to keep it simple and light. Something like this, or even this one here, would be perfectly sufficient. And if you don't have a pot gripper, you can always use a thick pair of leather gloves to handle your dishes, or even perhaps something like a rag to grab them to pull them off the fire when you need to. And then comes the decision on what material you want your cook set to be made from. In front of me here I have 3 different options. I've got aluminum, I've got some stainless steel, and I've got a carbon steel skillet here. And the differences between them are going to be weight and durability. So the lightest option that we have here is aluminum, very, very lightweight, but it's not super strong. It can get dented pretty easily, and if you get it too hot in the fire, it can burn up. Next up we have stainless steel, a heavier option for sure, but also more durable. And then the carbon steel is also rather heavy, but fairly durable. So I think the most blatant comparison to make is between the stainless steel and the aluminum, mainly because carbon steel I wouldn't say is a super great option for backcountry camping. If you don't take proper care of it, it can get rusted on you, and again, it is very heavy compared to the other materials. So that leaves us between stainless steel and aluminum, and I'd say the most fair comparison to make would be between these 2 kettles right here. This one's stainless and this one is aluminum, and the weight difference between them is just ridiculous. The stainless steel one weighs almost twice as much as the aluminum. Now, of course, the stainless is going to be way more durable. These are both a liter, at least that's what they were labeled as 1 liter pots, but the weight difference between the 2 is quite outstanding. Another rather fair comparison is between these two pots here, this one is a stainless steel. Now this one is rated for 4 liters, and this one's only rated for 3, but the difference in weight, the stainless steel is much heavier. The aluminum feels once again light as a feather in comparison. Now of course the stainless once again is going to be more durable, but you have to ask yourself, is that durability worth the extra weight? Now there are some people that believe that cooking with aluminum can have negative effects on your health. Personally, through the research that I've done, I don't think that there is any cause for concern to be avoiding cooking with aluminum. But again, do your own research, make your own decisions. But for me, I have no issues cooking with aluminum. So how much cookware does a woodsman really need? Do we need all these pots and pans and dishes and coffee pots? No. We definitely don't. Again, it depends on what you're cooking and how many different food items you want to have cooked and ready at the same time. But if you plan your meals accordingly and focus mainly on single pot dishes like soups, stews, skillet meals, things like that, you can get away with a pretty minimal kit. Generally speaking, you can get away with 1 pot and 1 pan and have a pretty successful outing. And actually, if you bring the right pot or kettle, as Nessmuk refers to it as, you can get away with just the 1 piece of camp cookware. A large pot with a wide base can do everything. Obviously you can boil in this, you can cook soups and stews, but because it offers that wide base, which basically has the same footprint as a frying pan, you could very easily fry up meals in this. That's why I'm not necessarily a big fan of these types of pots with the narrower base, because you are limited to what you can do with them. Sure, you can boil in them, you can cook meals that need to be boiled, like soups and stews or rice, but you can't do any frying in it. You can't put eggs in there and scramble them up or fry them. Whereas something like this is much more versatile. And even something like this, a frying pan with a deep sidewall, this frying pan will hold over 1 liter of water. So if you paired this with a lid, it may not be the most efficient way to do it, but you certainly can get by with just a frying pan to meet your water needs, to cook your meals. But in my opinion, the large pot paired with a lid is the most versatile piece of camp cookware you can have. When you're cooking in the outdoors, you don't need a wide variety of pots and pans, plates and kettles. Rather, a few simple items in a well thought out kit will be more than sufficient and greatly lighten the load in your pack. So far this series, we've discussed the tools that Nessmuk carried with him. We went a little more in depth on the pocket axe. We've now discussed his tinware. And those were the 3 things that I wanted to make dedicated videos for in regards to his gear. For the rest of it, his knapsack, his clothing, blanket bag, shelter, and a few others, I won't be making dedicated episodes on, but I may touch on them later on in this series. For now though, we're going to begin setting up a Nessmuk styled camp, and that is what we will be beginning in the next episode, which I hope you will join me for. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.